Welcome back to Whitetail Garage. On this week's episode, we're going to take a look at a 2008 Kawasaki Mule Trans 4x4, where I basically did a ground-up restore of sorts. It was in pretty bad shape when I got it, but in the end, it turns out to be a really good hunting unit. Stick with me, and I think you'll enjoy it. In a past life, this mule was a piece of construction rental equipment. The person I bought it from had started to take it apart and get it cleaned up. That's why the bed sides are missing in these pictures. It had quite a bit of damage on the driver's front. The hood, grille, and front fenders were damaged, and the grille guard was even bent. Some of the parts were just missing, like the rear fenders, the horn button. The rest had serious signs of wear. The engine had a lot of hours, but it was visually in good shape. Initially, it didn't start easily and didn't run right either. But after a carb rebuild and new plugs, it fires right up now and runs great. I began tearing down the chassis in order to inspect what I'd purchased, and at a minimum eliminate rust and repaint. At that point I noticed the rear brakes were hanging a bit, and that made it difficult rolling it in and out of the garage. To add to that, the parking brake didn't function at all because the cables were seized. Once I replaced it and got the brakes working, then it was able to roll in and out of the garage as needed. After getting it tore down and taking a look at the chassis, turns out it was solid. Just surface rust with no significant penetration anywhere. Once I removed all that I thought was necessary, I began taping off whatever was left that I didn't want painted. The rest of the surface prep was only a thorough wash with, soap and water, nothing significant. Then I did a generous coat of rust inhibitor. And then finally 3 coats of satin black that had a rust preventative additive in the paint. I'm going on my 4th season in the field with this mule, through heavy brush, deep mud, and plenty of dirty boots on the inside, and the paint has held up well beyond my expectations. I painted the exhaust with a high temp flat black paint and the wheels with a high gloss black paint. I planned to replace the tires. I wasn't worried about getting paint on them and didn't bother taping them on. Once the chassis was finished, it was time to start bolting it back together, starting with the new body parts, the hood, front fenders, and grille. did a headlight restore on the headlights, so those turned out quite new looking, but they were the original that were glazed over. The hood, front fenders, and grille are factory parts from Kawasaki. It was at this point though that I realized the rear axle U-joints were completely toast on this unit. There are 4 total, 2 inner and 2 outers, and both of the inner U-joints were missing most of the pin bearings. It took a surprising amount of work to be able to get the axles out. A lot of parts to remove, and the axle support bar had to be shifted back and forth to remove the axles. It was really tough. By the way, the U-joints were over $100 a piece from Kawasaki. The U-joints I found are working great, and they're much, much cheaper. They'll be linked in the description, of course. The Kawasaki U-joints did not have grease fittings, whereas the aftermarket ones did. Finished up painting the bed in a gloss black and reassembled it. Lubed up the parking brake. Completed reassembling the front end with cleaned up parts, new hardware, and a freshly painted grille guard. Reinstalled the seats and dash. At last, I could start adding options. These camo seat covers are actually a Kawasaki branded item, and they fit perfectly. They're super thick and very tough. I highly recommend them. They even fit on the latest 4010 models. I installed a battery cutoff switch that has a keyed removable knob that adds some security. Since this unit sits for periods of time, I wanted to make sure I'd always have a good battery to come back to. I fabbed a bracket to bolt it to the chassis right next to the parking brake, and while out of sight, it's still very easy to get to, even in the seated position. This is what it looks like with the knob removed. This is the factory option metal roof I reinstalled after painting it satin black. I fabbed up my own rear fender brackets that were really easy to make and much cheaper and stronger than the factory parts that were missing. The Mule had been running great, but seemed to lack power and would sometimes fall on its face. After checking fuel pressure, I realized it was dropping severely under full throttle. It was an easy repair, 1 bolt and 2 wire connections. With a new fuel pump, it was back to running like new. Then on a different trip, it started overheating. While out in the field, the radiator fan wasn't kicking on, and after doing some diagnosing, I found the fan motor was seized and the temp sensor wasn't working either. I decided to replace the fan with a low-profile electric and wire it to come on when the key is on. I added some camo wrap to the bedside to complete the look and added my first gun boot. This model of Mule doesn't have factory cup holders, and the only thing I could find were not ideal and were way overpriced and mounted to the hood. I ended up designing and building my own out of wood and painted them with several coats of spray-on bed liner, hoping to encase the wood to protect it. It seems to be holding up quite well in the build so far. I screwed them to the floorboard with the flat angle brackets you see in these pictures, and I'll link those in the description. My amazing wife bought me a 50-inch LED light bar for Christmas and a 4,000-pound UTV winch, both of those installed really easily. I wanted to add a stereo, and again, everything on the market was way overpriced. I was given a pair of 6x9s and a CD player deck with Bluetooth and USB, so I designed and built an overhead housing to keep the stereo and some switches. I wanted the unit to be serviceable without removal. To do this, I mounted the speakers on standoffs inside the box and made the speaker grill removable. I was able to use fence strapping that matched the diameter of the roll bar to securely mount the box to the ceiling. I painted it with bed liner material just like I did the cup holders to provide the protection I wanted. the strapping I painted gloss black. I added a rock light kit for interior lighting and mounted the controller in the overhead box as well. I added a ground hub in the center so that I could get away with running a single ground wire out of the box to the chassis. I used the switches to control the LED light bar out front, 2 LED light bars out back, the interior lights, the stereo, and the fan. I have 1 switch left. Later I plan on adding 2 side LED lights, and I'll control them with that. To power all the accessories, I added a new fuse box that has all the relays and fuses needed. I figured out that the roll bar is open. To complete the look, I decided to drill a hole at the top and bottom and pass the harness I built through rather than zip tie conduit to the outside. This serves both as protection and just looks better. I used Cat 6 Ethernet cable to signal the relays from the overhead console to the fuse block, which lives under the driver's seat. Here's where the harness enters at the top on the back side of the roll bar, and then exits the side of the roll bar at the base, right beside the parking brake. In order to ensure the interior plastics could still easily be removed, I added standoffs made from all thread to mount the new fuse box right next to the old one. I labeled the fuse and relay locations on the lid of the fuse box so I could identify them later. Here are the rock lights turned on at night. They're an RGB setup and can be changed to any color. I went with green because they say some animals have a hard time seeing that color. The stereo allowed me to customize the color as well, and I purchased the switch gang in green. I found a used windshield online. The price was cheap, but the design eliminates the use of the front trunk space because the upper portion folds down for transport. I sourced some new clamps that allows me to use the hinge to flip up the bottom instead and gain access to the trunk space, which I use regularly. We very much enjoyed this mule, and it definitely gets the job done. It is a workhorse that I was able to get for cheap and spend a few more bucks and a bit of time and get a solid ride for years to come.
I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Be sure to leave any questions you've got in the comments, and I'll absolutely reply to them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a good...
What did you say, Dad?
Sweetheart, I'm filming. Well, I hope you enjoyed that mule.